And by the way, please remember those words next time, any of you, if you're expecting a child and that you were hoping and your mother was hoping and your father was hoping and your extended cousins were hoping it's going to be a son, and you have a daughter. You remember that Allah didn't highlight the birth of a child like He did the birth of Mariam salamun alayha. It's an honor to have a daughter. It's a gift of Allah to have a daughter. Our du'as are a means by which we connect to Allah. Our du'as are not a means by which this world becomes heaven. This world is going to be full of trials. People that were much better than we are had difficulty in life. Today's khutbah is dedicated to a very unique individual mentioned repeatedly in the Quran. It's Mariam salamun alayha. And the reason I decided to give a khutbah on some aspects of her life that Allah highlights in the Quran are actually inspired by a question somebody asked me this week. Somebody came to me this week and said that they've had a very close relationship with Allah since childhood, and that they've made dua to Allah from a very early age, praying tahajjud, even when they were a teenager. And whenever they asked Allah for something, Allah provided. This person actually had a pretty tough life. Father passed away at an early age, no brothers, and this woman has lived a pretty lonely life and basically decided to really truly depend on Allah. And so as she grew and developed in her years, she found that Allah miraculously answers her prayers. Every time she asks Allah for something, Allah has never left her prayer unanswered. So she developed this reliance and this closeness with Allah and would always turn back to Allah. She needs something, she goes and prays 2 rak'ahs and she makes dua to Allah. So a really beautiful connection she had with Allah. Where did the question come from? The question came from a fact that more recently she went through quite a series of very unexpected difficulties in life. And she decided that she's going to increase her ibadah to Allah and increase her du'as because her problems have also increased. So you figure the more your problems increase, the more you're going to ask Allah to help you solve your problem. And so she does that, and she prays like she's never prayed before, fasts like she's never fasted before, begs Allah, cries to Allah, sheds tears before Allah like she's never done before. But the problems keep getting worse. They don't get any better. And she starts thinking to herself, maybe Allah is not happy with me because before I used to pray and everything used to get answered. I've never had this problem before. Every time I had a need, I turned back to Allah and Allah solved my problem. But now I'm making dua after dua after dua, and I continue to beg Allah and my problems are not getting solved, they're only getting worse. What could possibly be the reason? And in her mind, the reason was, I must have done something wrong. Allah must no longer be answering my prayers because somehow I've been disqualified. I'm not in Allah's good books anymore. The reason I decided to give this khutbah is that this is a very common notion that can creep into somebody's mind. Now I get to Mariam salamun alayha, and I really, when she spoke to me, I remembered her because the thing with Mariam salamun alayha was even when she was young, her birth was strange. It was mentioned in the Quran. Not many people's birth is mentioned in the Quran. And the mother was expecting a son, but she had a daughter instead. And Allah says, "Laysa dhakaru kal untha," which has a multiple layers of meaning, but I'll just highlight one of them. This girl is like no other boy. This girl is special. And by the way, please remember those words next time, any of you, if you're expecting a child and that you were hoping and your mother was hoping and your father was hoping and your extended cousins were hoping it's going to be a son, and you have a daughter. You remember that Allah didn't highlight the birth of a child like He did the birth of Mariam salamun alayha. It's an honor to have a daughter. It's a gift of Allah to have a daughter. And it's actually the behavior of the mushrikun to be upset that you had a daughter. ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. His face turns dark and he's depressed. He's swallowing his upset attitude because he had a girl. Girls are a blessing from Allah Azza wa Jalla, an honor. And it's a disrespect not only of the gift of Allah, but of the ayat of the Quran when you're upset that you had a daughter. You should be mindful of that. But that's on a side note. This child is born. She's actually given a special place in what was then the central house of Allah. And Zakaria alayhi salam used to take care of her, and every time he used to come to visit her to make sure she's doing okay, because she was dedicated living in the house of Allah. كُلَّمَا دَخَلَ عَلَيْهَا زَكَرِيَّا الْمِحْرَابِ وَجَدَ عِنْدَهَا رِزْقًا. Every time he'd walk in, he'd see food in front of her, and he'd say, "Where did you get these fruits?"